Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, it's my good friend. He's not wearing a toboggan tonight for the first time this year. It's my friend, Matt. Matt, what's going on over there?
Hey, Mark, not much, man. It's got to be a true sign of spring. I've finally taken the beanie off my head because
That's right.
It's warm enough out there. Central Kentucky's dealing us some pretty beautiful weather these last couple of days, I got to say.
Yeah, man, it's been nice. But the real question is, Matt, are you wearing pants or not? I didn't check.
Pants are in place tonight.
It's not shorts weather yet for you. See, I'm in shorts today, man.
Not shorts. But, man, we got beautiful spring blooming out there. Sorry to cut you off, but, Mark, it's just
all right, dude.
It wouldn't be spring if I wasn't talking about the daffodils and the crocuses and the tulips starting to come up. So it's a pretty exciting time for me.
We need to go back to that episode last year when you did that. That was so great. It's like
you made fun of me.
Crocuses, the daffodils. Yeah, that's all right, man. You're excited about spring. I don't blame you, man. It's good because you get to get back outside and train, man, on the bike and running and everything.
That's right. That's right. Just got out for my first bike ride of the season yesterday. So
yeah, very nice. How far did you go?
Oh, just a quick little hour and 15 minutes just to remember how to ride a bicycle again.
Well, that's an hour and 15 minutes more than I did, Matt. So good on you for that right there, man. No doubt about it. All right. So let's see. We got a birthday this week for one of our Barrel Society members, Robin Rossmell. So happy birthday, Robin. That's actually going to be, this comes out Friday, so it'll be the following week. So anyway, happy birthday, Robin.
Hey, happy birthday, Robin.
Yeah. And then I need to thank our sponsors, the Stave Restaurant out there in Millville, Kentucky, making some great food. Chef Kyle Klatke, new chef out there. He's changed up the menu some, and it's just really good. Stop by and see them. They're out there between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve. And Castle and Key actually has a new release coming out. This comes out Friday. So the release is actually coming out as you listen to this. And I have a scheduled appointment at 10:45. So I'm going to pick up one of those bottles of rye whiskey, the single barrel rye. So I'm looking forward to grabbing one of those today. Well, it'll be today when you hear this on Friday, maybe. But yeah, so Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve. But yeah, the Staves are right there between them. So check them out, thestavekentucky.com. And then also, we also have to thank 3 Chord Bourbon, our other sponsor. We really appreciate their support. Ari Sussman, the master blender, master distiller there, just doing a great job. He's like a wizard up there, man, mixing all these barrels together and doing some really good stuff. So we appreciate their continued support. And Matt, with that said, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. Let's get right into it. We have joining us on the Bourbon Life Podcast this evening, morning, or afternoon, whenever you're listening to it, the managing editor and critic from the Whiskey Raiders, Jay West. Jay, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I need to throw that in there also, that he's also, most people would know him as Tate.
Yes, that's also me. Yeah, Tate and I have never been seen in the same room twice.
That's right. It's like Batman and Jay. You never know, right? So
yeah, I always think of the Dread Pirate Roberts from
yeah, that's right.
Princess
Bride.
What's the theory that there's like Guy Fieri and the lead singer of Smash Mouth and someone else are like all the same person? I forget who the third person is, but like they're all the same person.
Oh man, I don't think I've ever heard that before, man.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of tinfoil for a Friday.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Welcome to the Conspiracy Theory Bourbon Podcast.
Man,
you didn't know we are going to throw those out at you, did you, Jay?
I love it.
Well, man, I'm excited to have you on the show. You and I guess we actually haven't met personally, in person, I should say. But we met each other virtually and got to hang out a month or two ago on an Instagram live. And you were kind enough to send me a sample of that Whistle Pig 18. That was fun. I really enjoyed getting to hang out and taste that with you on Instagram. And that was a really good evening, man. So I definitely appreciate that. I've been looking forward to this show. I know we had to switch the schedule up just a little bit, and appreciate your flexibility to join us here. So thanks a lot for that. And we're still continuing to mix it up because we had things picked up and to drink. I shipped out samples to Jay and I had a wrong address, and someone has ended up with 3 samples of whiskey. That's all right, man. We got it figured out. So we're good to go. So Jay, do me a favor and just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, and then also a little bit how you actually got into the whiskey industry and what it is that you've done.
Yeah, totally. So like you guys mentioned, I'm the managing editor and critic for Whiskey Raiders, which is a new site. Super fun. We launched the first week of December in 2020. I'm kind of seeking to be the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey, and we can kind of dig into the story of why the whiskey world needed a Rotten Tomatoes in the first place. But I've been writing about whiskey for a very long time, at least in the scope of I'm under 30, so 6 years is kind of a long time. That's a pretty big chunk of my adult life. But
sure.
I got started writing for Reddit, which I thought was super fun. I eventually moved into the moderation sphere. So I moderate Our Bourbon, which is, I think currently is still the largest whiskey community that exists. We're at 176,000 people. So
wow.
There's a little bit going on. I orchestrate the single barrel program for Our Bourbon. And then outside of that, I'm writing about whiskey every day, but I also get to manage and oversee this super cool project known as Whiskey Raiders. So spelled Raiders, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And we are aggregating and writing about whiskey every day. And that's kind of where my focus is drawn. But I didn't always start in the industry. I wrote for 5 years before kind of, people, would come to me and be like, hey, you should join the industry. I'd be like, no, that's not right. Not a good time. But finally in 2020, amidst COVID, the right opportunity came along and I got to join up with Dan Abrams, who's a pretty cool guy. And we got to launch Whiskey Raiders.
Yeah, that's really cool. So there's a lot in that. So let's kind of break that down just a little bit. So first of all, I mean, I'm an older guy, right? So, I mean, I've heard of Reddit and I'm not really, super active.
I've heard of the
Reddit.
internet, but,
I used to have to walk barefoot to school too. Right. So anyway, but yeah, so can you kind of break down for those listeners out there right now that might not be that familiar with what Reddit actually is, man? Can you just kind of explain what that community is, what that whole bit is about?
Yeah, totally. So Reddit is a big organization. It's a big website. And Reddit encompasses just about everything you can think about. And so Reddit is socially engineered. It's kind of considered the front page of the internet. It aggregates web stories that people want to submit to their own communities known as subreddits. So within, if you go to just reddit.com, you're not going to see probably anything about whiskey. So we are a subreddit, r/bourbon. That's how it's categorized. Is a subreddit is r/whatever the community name is. I'm u/take, u is for user, but r/bourbon is where everybody comes to talk about American whiskey, talks about bourbon, rye, and everything on Reddit, which is kind of fun because it differs from Facebook in a lot of ways, but everything on r/bourbon is completely related to American whiskey in one way or another. And it's submitted by people from, who anybody can submit to Our Bourbon as long as it follows the rules, which is one of my jobs, is pulling stuff that, people aren't so good at reading all the time, where, and users on Reddit are as anonymous as they want to be. So people go by usernames, which is mine is take, t8ke. People now know who I am as a person. They know what I do, but a lot of Reddit is anonymous. It's taken me many years to understand who the names and faces behind some usernames are. And there's still some people I don't know who they are, even though I talk to them every day, which I think is super fun because of that. It kind of removes the Facebook element. Everybody is at Our Bourbon because they want to talk about American whiskey. And and that's why it's so special to me, is because it's, 176,000 people who just want to be there and talk about whiskey. And if you are also interested in things like sandwiches or dogs or like politics, like there's other subreddits. You can always go to a different corner of Reddit and find that other thing. And you might see people that you recognize from other subreddits, but it's very siloed. So if you just want to talk about golden retrievers and bourbon, like Reddit has you covered. If you want to talk about 50 different things, you can do that on Reddit. But we get a lot of people who are just on Reddit to talk about bourbon, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. Especially when you got 176,000, I think, right? That's what you said. I just looked at it again today and I was like, damn, that's huge. I mean, that is a lot of people, man. That's crazy. And the fact that it's mostly mostly anonymous, I guess. I mean, that's what kind of is strange, for someone like me. I've been on Facebook for the last 10 or 11, 12 years now, and Instagram now, obviously for 2 years, even though I'm the Bourbon Life on there and not myself. But there's some level of anonymity, I guess, to that aspect of it. But just to be strictly anonymous, that's kind of a whole new world for a lot of people, and it's kind of fun. But I think it opens the doors, I guess, potentially for some problems for some people if you get some trolls out there that are just being jerks.
Yeah.
But your job, I guess, is to kick them out. So
yeah, people are usually generally good, which I like to see. We're not a very trolly subreddit.
Yeah, that's good.
There's not a lot of trouble, which is good.
Yeah, or they'll have to face you.
I do ban a non-zero amount of people every single day. So
there you go.
But with that many people, like, it's mostly just like, hey, you broke this rule a bunch of times in a row. Why don't we give you 60 days off? Come back.
Yeah, there you go. Take a little break, a vacation, man. Just a little break, have some fun. So, I did what we always do, or not.
I was wondering when you were going to come around to it.
I know, man. I always forget. Shoot, we need to talk about what we're drinking. So got right into the topic there, Jay, and forgot. But this first round, we poured up, and I felt bad, because I noticed yesterday or the day before that you had posted a review of Larceny, the new Larceny Barrel Proof A121. And in that post, you said, oh, and by the way, check out our recent review of Elijah Craig Barrel Proof A121. I was like, well, damn. So yeah, I'd already picked that one, but I just got my bottle not too long ago. So I was just curious and wanted to taste that one. So we got this one poured up. So now, I mean, Jay, and this is what you do, man. So kind of walk us through when you're reviewing a bourbon. I mean, how do you approach it, and how do you handle it? Do you do it blind usually, or do you know what it is first, and then you're going to go pick it apart?
Sure. Yeah. So like I tell a lot of people, I try and do everything that I possibly can blind, because I think that truly blind is best. I think time and time again, blind is really the only good way to taste anything. That said, I'm not at the point in life where I have like a whiskey assistant, at least like who isn't my dog. So and my fiance, her goal in life has not been to just like blind whiskey all the time. And she's made that very clear to me, which I think is completely acceptable.
Yeah.
So I typically know what I'm drinking. Whenever I can, I like to get people to send me blind samples. It's super fun. I just did 5 blind Blanco tequilas with a bunch of buddies, and it was an interesting, fun time. But, especially when a bottle like Elijah Craig shows up, it's pretty hard to avoid knowing what that is. So I try and, if it's blind, great. I do my same three tastings. If I know what it is, also totally fine. That's just kind of how things run at this kind of scale. But the biggest thing I like to do is never make an opinion on something once. So, for tasting Elijah Craig, I do circular tasting. So I would probably have this as my first pour one night, maybe in the middle of some tasting another night, maybe the final pour near the end on a third night, and see how those notes change with things like my mood, things like if I had really strange cuisine or maybe really fatty food, or, I'm kind of on a hot sauce kit. Like we started talking about in early February, and actually I got a Fuego box since then, which is like, it's like a huge sampler of hot sauces. And I like, bottles like 5 and 6 and 7 and above, they're super spicy. Like that torches my palate. So there's really no whiskey happening after that. But, I try and be mindful of the things that would influence the way I'm tasting.
Yeah.
And other than that, like I try and think it's, I don't have any crazy tasting tricks. Like I really like to focus on the nose, take down the notes that remind me of things I have. If I like certain aspects, I'll note that. If I wish it was a little bit different, I'll note that. And then I move through the palate. And I really like to focus on the finish, because we see a lot of evolution in whiskey as it's kind of dripping down your throat and stuff. But
right.
Yeah, I wish I could do everything blind. That would be like a pipe dream for me. If I could just have someone whose only job was to like blind whiskey and pour it and be like, but
yeah, man, it could happen. You never know, right? I mean,
maybe someday. Yeah.
It could be. You need to talk to Dan and say, hey, man, you know what? I'm just going to tell you, if you want this to be legit, we got it.
Everything's got to be blind.
It would be cool. And I'm looking for it. Like I'll be in a spirits competition later this year. Called the Ascots, and that is 100% blind. And I can't wait to just get like everything blind. And like that to me is like, people are like, isn't that like stressful? Isn't that daunting? I'm like, no, this is what I've always wanted. Like,
yeah,
doing everything blind. Like this sounds amazing. Like, let's do it.
Yeah. So they ask, is that Fred's? That's Fred's deal, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I'd seen him promoting that on Instagram. So that sounds like it'd be a pretty fun time, man. So how many will you be tasting for that? Do you know?
God, I wish I knew. I pinged him the other day and I was like, like, what's some more details? And he was like, you only get vodka. And I was like, damn it, that is a very Fred answer. So I don't know. We'll see.
Oh.
It'll be a fun adventure. I don't know if it'll be 2 or 200, but I'm
Oh,
here.
damn.
And I know they'll all be blind.
That's funny. And for those people that don't know Fred Minnick, I mean, he's a writer and a critic, a reviewer as well. And he hates vodka. As a matter of fact, I think his first T-shirt, one of his first T-shirts he put out last year it just said vodka sucks. So that was pretty funny. All right. So let's get back. Let's talk about this barrel proof, man. What do you guys, I always start with Matt, but Matt, no offense. I'm going to start with Jay tonight.
None taken.
Yeah. What do you pick up on this, Jay?
Yeah. So this one's really interesting to me. Elijah Craig Barrel Proof has had a very similar profile for a very long time, but I noticed a pretty big shift in this year. And I think it definitely coincides with that lower proof.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people were kind of getting hives or kind of stressing over the fact that it's a much lower proof, but to me, it comes out much more savory. So I'm getting like big caramel and toffee and kind of a light tobacco character, which is really new for me.
Okay.
The oak is definitely there. I think there's more oak
Yeah.
than there typically is, even though, I mean, there's always been a very hefty amount in those 12 years, and they
Sure.
blend them to be pretty savory as well. But the palate and the ABV are pretty deceptive. Like, I would not have guessed that this is under 130. Like, it drinks a little bit hot, but it just has so much viscosity to it.
Yeah.
Which is reassuring, because that's one of the things I love about Elijah Craig Barrel Proof. And I was ready to drink thin.
Yeah. And you're drinking out of a fancy glass.
It's basically just a Glencairn with a stem. That's
is it a Copita or Copita?
Technically, I guess it would be called, a Copita. Copita is typically like a Mexican drinking vessel.
Yeah.
But I think it's called like the Luigi. It's literally Glencairn on a stem. So
Glencairn on a stem.
Glencairn on a stick, baby.
It's because all my Glencairns are actually dirty. I need to do some dishes down here.
It's the corn dog of tasting dishes, of tasting glasses, right? It's just it's the Glencairn on a stick, like a hot dog on a stick, man. There you go. So Matt, what are you picking up on this one?
The first thing that I got was really savory fruit notes. I picked up raisin and a little bit of plum and maybe some fig, or like stone fruits, dark red wine fruit coming through, maybe a touch of cherry. And then I got a little bit of the oak coming through, and specifically the char on it coming through, like a real smoky, kind of toasty, charred flavor. And then the nose was vanilla from there. I had a nice, good whiff of vanilla with it.
And it's funny because the first thing I smelled was oak when I went into it, and I love Elijah Craig Barrel Proof, and that's usually not the one. That's not the one thing that stands out to me initially. I mean, obviously it's usually in there, but for some reason with this batch, that was kind of the first thing that popped out at me was the oak, and I thought, well, maybe I'm just imagining that, and I went back in, for another smell. But this is, like you said, Jay, this is a 12-year-old. This batch is 123.6 proof. Yeah. So it's it's funny to say that's a lower proof.
It's like lower with like air quotes.
Yeah. This is a low proof Elijah Craig Barrel Proof at only 123.6.
Yeah, the sipper of Elijah Craig Barrel Proofs right here at the lowest proof.
But I agree on the it drinks higher to me than 123. There's a little bit of more heat to it. And I guess the A batches generally, at least the ones I've seen, they tend to run in that 130 range. So when I saw that it was 123, I mean, I think that was probably my initial reaction. Like a lot of other people was like, oh,
yeah. And both the Larceny and the Elijah Craig this year were low, and I heard a lot of grumblings. And I won't say that I was concerned, but I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Maybe this is going to be a letdown or very different. And it certainly is different, but not a letdown, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't see this as a letdown, but following up, because this is following up the 920, the C920, and I love that one.
Yeah,
and even the 520. I mean, the 520 was a really good one as well. The 920, for some reason, it just seemed like it was one of my favorites. It just seemed to hit all the right spots for me. stocked up on that one and the 520, thanks to my buddy Matt, and his trips to Michigan. Now you're up north too, right? Are you from the north? Is that where are you originally from there, Jay?
No, it's actually kind of fun. So I'm in Madison, Wisconsin right now, which is just about to thaw, which is very relieving.
Yeah,
since we're kind of staring down spring. But I grew up in Seattle. My parents live on the East Coast. I went to school in upstate New York and ended up in Madison, Wisconsin. So I've kind of ping-ponged around the country.
Yeah.
But the Midwest is home. It just took me a while to find it.
Just, yeah, no doubt. So going back to the story, but I mean, how did you just decide this is what you wanted to do? I mean, what made you say, damn, you know what? I think I want to get on Reddit and just start writing a lot of reviews and become a moderator and just grow this thing to crazy size. I mean, what really was that impetus? What got you going?
Yeah, totally. So going, as all good stories start, I was in college, and as all good college people are, I was on the poor side, but in high school I played competitive lacrosse. I played a lot of lacrosse, and I sustained an injury in high school sports that basically took me out of the drinking world for a couple of years. And so, which is good. Your first year of college is probably best spent sober, but nobody knows that. Just from like whatever, it's probably the right way. But when I finally got cleared to drink for a while, they said, it's probably good if you want one drink a night, totally cool. If you want two, that's cool, but maybe cap it off after that. But like, if you want to drink a lot, like you're going to find yourself in a really bad spot, because I had damaged my pancreas playing lacrosse. And
okay. Oh, yeah.
And it's funny because my dad works in the hospital system, and he was like, no, like you got to take these people seriously, because there's only 3 rules in working in a hospital, and it's eat when you can, it's sleep when you can, and like, for the love of God, don't touch the pancreas. And I was like, So weird aside, I decided that if I was to return to normalcy with my college peers, that maybe 2 Keystone Lights wasn't that interesting. So maybe I should check out some things that were better. And, I thought, let's give this whiskey thing a shot. So I picked up Wild Turkey 101 because it was like $3 more than Wild Turkey 81. And I could do math at that point. So I thought, that's probably a good value. Yeah. And I was surprised. I really liked it. And I thought, and people would like look at me like crazy, like, what are you going to mix that with? And I was like, but it's just fine on its own. Like, why would you want to, and like, I didn't really do cocktails at that point. Like, I didn't really have time. I wasn't, I didn't have like flexible income, but I did realize that one thing I knew is that I loved whiskey. So I graduated, engineering program, had a good time. And I realized that one of the things I'd also learned in school was that the best way to figure out what you don't know is to try and teach other people. So, if we were doing big projects and I'd say, I think this is what I understand, let me try and teach it to you. And then you quickly figure out what you don't know. So I figured, hey, I looked up, I did a lot of time on Reddit, and I figured, okay, if all my other interests on Reddit, there has to be a bourbon subreddit. And sure enough, there was, and it was much smaller back then, but
sure.
People were doing these things called reviews, and I was like, holy crap, like people just write about it and people agree. And like, I figured like, this is perfect. Like, I'll write a review. I had just picked up a bottle of Eagle Rare 10 years. So I thought, I was like, okay, this is generally how people format it. Like, I'm going to see if I can pick out smells and flavors, and people are going to tell me like how bad I am. And if I can make it through a couple of days of this, like, I think I'll learn some stuff. And if I don't, then like, I at least knew I gave it a shot, and I'm just going to be a casual whiskey guy.
Yeah.
And clearly, I think I posted like review like 1950 something yesterday. So it's gone on for more than a week, but, and so that's where I realized like, hey, I'm learning a lot. This is super fun. Like, I'm finding people who have a very similar interest and are like not at all uptight about it, but I was doing it anonymously at that point because I was 22, like, and I totally get it. Like, a lot of 22, like, not like the most upstanding, like, complex personalities that exist. But I realized that if we're going to really do this like a fun, competent, scientific way, let's remove, I think, the biggest negative bias I have, which is the fact that I'm younger than probably everybody else. And I figured out there was also a lot of other young people too, but the average age on our bourbon is definitely not like young 20s. So
right. I
wanted people to tell me how bad my writing was because my writing was bad, not because I was super young. And it turned out that that wasn't the case. People were very welcoming, and I learned a lot, and people gave me really strong criticism. And to this day, my favorite thing is meeting up with people in the flesh. And like, when I walk through that door to like say hi to people, like, it's very clear that they expected someone really old.
Yeah. Right.
but you're young. And I'm like, well, I am. And isn't that fun? Like, isn't that the point? So,
yeah.
But, you know, at that point I was just a contributor, and I started writing a lot, and I met some local people. We had some cool groups, and eventually one of the big subreddits at the time was called Scotch Swap, and it needed a moderator. And people were like, hey, you're super detail oriented. Why don't you give this a shot? And at that point, trading on Reddit was still totally cool and kosher, which it's not anymore. So I was,
don't try it.
do not, for the love of God, do not try it. But Reddit, when they took on some venture capital, they decided that Scotch Swap should be banned. Unfortunately, we found out the moment that everybody else found out. So they just one day they banned us. I was in a meeting. And my phone like vibrated off the table. I got like 75-ish messages in like 10 minutes, and people were like, I can't get to Scotch Swap. And I was like in a meeting, and I was like, this is a bad time. And I found out like, hey, like we got banned. So
man,
I'd put a lot of time into it, and I found that I I was like a moderator without a home, right? It's all volunteer anyways. But I was like, you know, this kind of sucks. Like I loved doing it. And so our bourbon was like, hey, we've grown kind of a lot lately. Why don't you come on over and help us out? And I was like, okay, you know, so I moseyed on over there, and have been moderating since then, and revived the barrel program in 2019. And that's been just a huge lot of fun. And even in COVID, it's been really cool to, you know, I'm not the only moderator. Sometimes people think I'm like the founder or the only mod. I'm technically the newest, but it's a big community. And in COVID, it's been fun to see everybody embrace each other and really double down on like what being an amazing bourbon community is all about.
Yeah, that sounds great, man. I tell you what, let's wrap up on the Elijah Craig and take a quick break. But so final thoughts on the A121. Jay, what do you got?
I like it. A little less caramel. It's more like cocoa, tobacco-y, peppery. In a way I give it a thumbs up.
I'm surprised at how spicy it finishes to me. It's only 10% rye, I think is the mash bills are 78 corn, 10% rye. To me, it drinks with a more spiciness on the finish to me, like a higher 18, maybe 25 rye, something like that. Matt, what about you, man?
It's got a good full finish on the palate. I picked up some of that vanilla and the caramel, and actually a little bit of chocolate. Excuse me, a little chocolate coming through as well. And the longer it's sitting here in the glass, it's just getting a little sweeter and toastier on the nose. So I think it's a hit.
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed too, Matt, was as we were talking, I kept sipping on it. It just seemed like it got sweeter on the nose and even sweeter on the palate to me. And then that finish was kicking off with that bit of spice, which I really enjoy it. Man, I'm a homer for barrel proof Elijah Craig. I'm always going to enjoy it. The differences and the nuances, even if it's a low proof of 123.6, I'm still going to be a fan of it. So
the beginner proof.
The beginner proof. That's right. All right, guys, let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsor, and we'll be back with more with t8ke West from Whiskey Raiders. Everybody sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Hey, Bourbon Lifers. When you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatke prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for round session, period, segment 2, whatever you want to call it, of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark. And with me, as always, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Doing good. You know, we are recording again live in the Bourbon Life studios. And the good thing is I got Matt a new setup here, man.
I was just going to comment on it as well.
Yeah.
I'm too fancy. I think this, the new camera and the computer you've got me on, I can see my face a little bit too well. It's kind of sobering.
Matt, you know, this is my sneaky plan to slowly convert us over towards a video focused Podcast. You do realize that, right?
I know. I need to get a mask or something.
The Mask Podcaster, man.
Yeah.
So nah, that's all right. One of these days, maybe we'll do that,
like
Matt.
Yeah.
One of these days. All right, man. So why don't you tell everybody who we have with us?
Oh yeah, joining us for round session or period number 2 is Jay West, the managing editor and critic at Whiskey Raiders. Jay, welcome back for round 2.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. The sequel's always best. At least, maybe not with films, but I'm sure it is with this podcast.
Like Rambo 2. Well, actually, Rambo 1 was still the best. You know, I'm sorry, not Rambo. Rocky. See, I get so many Sylvester Stallone movies, you get confused. But
oh man,
Rocky 1 was the best. All right, so this round we're drinking something a little different. You know, we're sticking with that high barrel proof trend here tonight since we switched things up. Matt, you've got the bottle, man. So why don't you tell everybody what we got poured up this round?
Yeah, I would be glad to. And thanks for jumping right into it, Mark, before we forgot. But
before we waste 11 minutes.
That's right.
Before we spend 11 minutes talking about other stuff and be like, oh shit, we're supposed to be drinking whiskey, aren't we? Oh man.
That's right.
Yeah.
But we have poured up the Booker's Pigskin Batch from 2020. It is 6 years, 7 months, and 7 days old, and is clocking in at 63.65% alcohol by volume or 127.3 proof.
Ooh, we bumped it up a couple notches there. Yeah, definitely, man. So, all right. So you guys, everybody's got it poured up here. Let's get some initial thoughts on it. Matt, you know what? You can jump in first this time. I feel bad for, skipping over you last time.
The nose on this as compared to the Elijah Craig is very different. If we're gonna
it is
kind of comparing those, I almost pick up like something more floral, something more citrus on the nose. Like I don't know the mash bill on this, but I would imagine there might be maybe a little more rye in it or something to give it some more of like a floral or citrus nose on it.
This bottle's been open a lot longer than that other bottle, so I don't know if that's affected it, but I don't, even though it's higher proof, I don't get really that ethanol kick off of this nose. I don't know. Jay, what about you?
This, it seems pretty tame, at least in the ethanol department. I noticed this has those really big boisterous, like funky peanut butter, jiffy, cocoa caramel, like whey protein kind of notes that are really inviting, like really kind of musty and dank, but in a positive way.
In a nice way. It's a nice mustiness,
Yeah.
And you always have to end that like in a good way though.
Yeah, it's in a good way.
It's like it's a good cellar, not a bad storm cellar.
Yeah. You know, it's not like they're going to make you put on the lotion or anything in the cellar. This is a nice cellar to hang out in, okay?
Clarice. Yeah, it reminds me of like peanut butter cup in a way that I love.
Gotcha. It's funny because I was smelling it almost. Now you're saying peanuts. Now that's all I can smell, Jay. But initially, I was like getting almost like a cinnamon kind of flavor or nose off of this one. A little bit of sweet spiciness, not coming across. We talked about some peppery flavor on that Elijah Craig, but this one comes across spicy, but more like to me, like almost more of a cinnamon type of spice.
I can see that.
Yeah. Which means that, see, when someone says I can see that, that's talk for no, I don't get that at all. But you know what? It's your show, so I'm going to be nice and
no. I can see like it's got that nice like kind of cinnamon bun texture in the back, which is like that sweet icing and like those light cinnamon notes. It's not like a Weller antique that's like, here's red hot candies, like go suffocate on them, which I appreciate.
See, Mark, you're doing all right though. I mean, you all are talking about like cinnamon and peanuts together. I'm over here like, oh, it smells like a margarita. Is that lime? Did someone put pineapple in this?
Yeah, there you go. But so Jay, before we talk about Whiskey Raiders, I was gonna ask you. So when you started doing this, I mean, you just said, "Hey, man, I'm just going to write," and you just started doing it. You got feedback from people. So did you undergo or go through any type of training program or rigorous study courses, or I mean, how did you grow and develop your palate? Was it just from just trying?
Yeah. So, and it's always interesting because a lot of people ask me this too. Like, how do I make my palate better? And I had to learn this kind of the hard way. Like initially it was difficult. Like, hey, I out of college, like I loved doing a bunch of cooking, but I still hadn't smelled like as many things as I smell now. And it took me a little while to realize that really having a good palate and having a good understanding of what you're smelling and tasting is only a little bit skill. Like this is like, this is not some like all-star thing. Like it's a practice thing. Like you need to be smelling and tasting new things, and your brain will make those connections for you. And I always say like, I didn't just wake up one day and be like, hey, here's 20 notes. Like my first review is incredibly Spartan. And I think that's super cool. Like I love to go back and read it because someone was telling me about it, and like there wasn't that much to it. And I think that's a real testament of like, that's what I could get back then. And this whole thing has been like a really long drawn out journey or trajectory, but I didn't take any big courses. I wish they had those things like the Knows Your Bourbon kit, like that they have now that didn't exist back then. But it was literally me understanding and writing down, like, I think it's this, but I don't quite get this note. And then like kind of just going through life and like being like, oh, smelling like butter caramel, or like cooking and like, hey, chili powder, or, cassia and stuff, and being like, oh, that's what that note is. And over time getting better at making those connections. And so that's what I tell people now, like, hey, if you want to tune your palate, like you should try and taste a lot of things, because you don't just one day wake up and get notes. But pre-COVID, like I'd be like, go to the spice aisle. Like you're going to learn so much just from sniffing like spices, different foods, like going to open air markets where food is cooking. Yeah. Because if you can't understand what that smell is or put it to a word, like you're never like, I'm trying to think of like an interesting one, but like coriander and gin, or like lavender, are two notes that people don't always like mentally have in the front of their head. But once you smell it, you know what it is. And once you get that nose and a spirit, like it's immediate, and like it's not a hard thing. But until you have that mental connection, like if you don't know what coriander smells like, you're not gonna walk up to this gin and be like, that's coriander. So it's a lot of making those like kind of neural connections in your brain.
That makes sense. And that's why Matt is such a great co-host, because he's worked in a bakery, and he's also worked as a cook as well in restaurants and things. So he's had a lot of experience in that industry. So it's fun when we're tasting things, and I can see the wheels turning, and I know he's relating those things back. We're talking about you over there, Matt. Oh yeah. You can hear us. Can't you?
I love coriander, by the way. Coriander is one of my favorite spices. I think it has such a distinct smell. I love coriander.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because like on Reddit, and people always, I get one nasty email like every couple of months. It's like you're making everything up. This is totally fake. And like before Whiskey Raiders, I was like, but why? There's no reason for me to fake any of this. Sure. And like if you just tried a little bit, I'm sure you would find these too. Mm-hmm. And it turns into a productive conversation. Like, oh wait, I can smell things too. And I'm like, yeah, have you tried? And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, well then why?
No, I just wanted to be an ass to you, man, because that's fun.
Yeah. And I'm like, and people always think it's interesting. They're like, you mean I have to try it? I'm like, yeah. Did you wake up yesterday and run a 5K? Like, did you wake up today and decide to be a tennis pro? Like, no. And I won't say that bourbon tasting should be an Olympic sport, or maybe it should be, but nobody gets good at something by not trying to do it at all. And I think that people need to be more open to taking risks and figuring out what they don't know and developing that if they're truly interested in it.
Yeah, man. And speaking of which, I made myself a little note that I guess Gear Patrol last year said that you were the most prolific whiskey reviewer on the internet. Yeah. And that's got to be pretty cool, right?
That felt fun. Someone sent it to me and I was like, wait,
what?
That's me. But yeah, that was, I believe it was Will Price, who's a pretty cool guy. And he was like, dude, everywhere I look, like if I'm looking at a spirit, like you've probably said something about it and it's coming up. And he was like, yeah, I think prolific's the word. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like that article was super fun. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm, kind of honored that someone who's not me was like, hey, this guy like knows something. Maybe you should listen to him.
Well, that's pretty cool, but it's got to be awkward. I mean, from a standpoint of, the concept and how Reddit works, because it's, like you said, it is basically anonymous. And people knew that you were Take, but they didn't know who you actually were. So, that's got to be kind of weird now coming out from behind. You're like Oz, man. They've pulled the curtain back on the great Oz, and here you are, man. So, I mean, how does that feel? How does that, now you're working with Whiskey Raiders. We can kind of talk about that too, man, but how does it feel to be, to be exposing yourself to everybody.
Yeah. We'll say exposing, not in like a weird trench coat kind of way.
Yeah,
but,
not in a weird way. Not in like a cellar, like you're stuck in the cellar kind of way, right? It's a good way.
But yeah, it was really interesting. And it was like kind of a weird moment for me because, there was always some comfort in anonymity too. Like, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog is like kind of the sentence. But but it was an interesting moment for me, especially because there's I've picked up some nasty people on Reddit too, who are just unhappy with what I do or that I found success or that they've been banned for whatever reason. I kind of thought like, is this dangerous? Like, is someone going to blow up my mailbox? But once I realized like, no, I don't think anybody would do that. It was kind of interesting and freeing. It was fun to, see people see me for the first time. Bourbon Pursuits Whiskey from Home, I think was like the first time that like my profile for speaking on a panel wasn't just like a black circle with like T written in it. Yeah. Which is weird. But beyond that, it was really cool to get to meet people and start to unearth some extra layers. Like these are other things besides bourbon that interest me, and find people like the Board of Aficionados group, which is our like non-bourbon selection, like our 4 dudes who are super similar to me, and we have fun times. Like that would have never happened if I like stayed in a very insulated shell. But it's also helped and kind of opened doors to talk with people in industry a little more, not candidly, but people are like, hey, like, people love to know who they're talking to. And sometimes like talking to the little black circle that is take, isn't the best for like, conducive and like long form, like interviews and talking and getting to know people at like a deeper industry level. But yeah, it was kind of scary first. Cause like for 5 years I'd taken comfort in like, I'm taken, that's it. And Fred Minnick he always jokes. He's like, you sound like a rapper, dude. Like, we're just like it's like just like those Daft Punk real like it's kind of like a rapper name. I'm like, yeah, but I also have a real name too. But I do usually use take because people always pick up on that. Like, there's not a lot of people that are just using 4-letter kind of anagram as their thing. But it was a very interesting transition, both personally because I was like, now that people know who I am, like, for better or worse, like let's have at it. Like the gloves are off. Let's do life.
Yeah, it's funny because you talk about the little black circle, and I was checking out a podcast last week. I think it was on Bourbon Pursuit, and Kenny's talking to you, and then every time you talk, the screen just turns into this big black box, and in the little white letters, it just said "take."
Yep. Yeah, that was it. That was a weird time too, because at that point too, I was like, people have heard my voice, and that feels very tinfoily now that tons of people know my voice, and I'm on like web streams and hosting shows and stuff. But yeah, it was really interesting to realize that like I think that this can go deeper, and I think that at this point, and at that point too, I like crossed the 25-year threshold. I'd kind of hoped that at some point I'll be old enough that like I'll have a beard and people won't just immediately judge like this baby faced little kid. Like I had a beard back then too, but I was like younger and in better shape. And, I kind of realized that after 1,000 reviews, people probably aren't gonna have some negative connotation just because he's young. Cause I can be like, hey, but just cause I'm younger than you, does that discount the last 1,000 reviews? And at this point, it's almost 2,000. Yeah. It's like it was kind of a weird, like not coming of age moment, but it was just like, once we do this, we can't go back. So like, let's be
open Pandora's box, and there you know.
Yeah, you can't control Z once you're not a black circle anymore. So it was a weird time, but ultimately, I think it was for the best, and I'm very pleased with how things have gone since then.
Yeah, very cool. And and speaking of beards, I have to compliment you there on on what you got going there. I mean, Matt, unfortunately, he is the beardless one.
I couldn't do it I couldn't do it if I tried. I did try.
Did try, man.
No shave November out of me, and the creepiest.
It was a caterpillar.
Creepiest itsy bitty little caterpillar across my upper lip. It was disgusting.
He showed up to record the podcast one night, and it was like a 70s porn mustache. He let it grow down.
That's like giving me props to even get that far.
No,
it was bad.
It looked good. I liked it, man. I liked it. I told him he should have shaved it off and like stuck it to a piece of paper, like glued it and like framed it, so he could have his little mustache. But he never followed suit with that, man. So.
Oh, dude, I did Movember once, and I walked in the door, and my fiance, who was just my girlfriend at the time, like just like double backed, and then when she talked to me for the rest of the night, She like mentally covered the front of my face with her hand. And I was like, okay, I gotta shoot this up just because like every time she would turn it, look at me and just like hold up her hand.
Hold her hand up.
Cover where the mustache was. And I was like, this is unsustainable.
That's all right. My wife still does that to me now. So, so let's talk about Whiskey Raiders, man. We talked about, how you got into this and, things started changing for you obviously in 2020. So Whiskey Raiders, how did all that come about? How'd you connect with Abrams Media and work that all out?
Yeah, totally. So digging back a little bit, Dan Abrams, who's the chief legal counsel for, analyst for ABC and also, hosted things like Live PD on A&E. He's always been a really big wine guy, which I think is interesting. But after casting set for Live PD, he would bring wine and all of his other co-hosts would bring bourbon. And they'd all have a drink and they'd be like, Dan, what you drinking? Why isn't it bourbon? And he'd be like, but I like wine. And then, they'd give him bourbon. He'd be like, okay, actually, I really like bourbon.
Yeah.
But there's a really big dichotomy between the bourbon world and the wine world. And the wine world has intense scrutiny on like ratings and aggregations. And if you are, I kind of use the imagery of like you're standing in the grocery store with 2 bottles of wine in your hand. It's incredibly easy to go to one source on the internet and get like everybody's opinions, like all the critics' ratings, like get a buy, no buy, this vintage is good, bad, here's what you should pay. And Dan had loved that because he'd been buying wine for a really long time. He was a really impressive seller, which is super cool. But when he went into bourbon, he kind of assumed that thing would exist. And he got kind of frustrated, like being in stores like this, that one kind of source of truth, that one aggregation system, that one easy place to find a review. And then all the critics' ratings of bottles just didn't exist. And so he found I got to put them down. I got to read through like 5 different blogs. Everything's like a really long post. Like this is not great for people who want to buy bourbon. So he said, we should I think that's a niche and we should fill it. But then they realized but also I need this because I don't know that much about bourbon. So we should probably find someone that knows at least a little bit more about me than bourbon. And that's where they kind of came knocking. They had been reading on Reddit for a while and they'd seen some other work and they're like, hey, we should talk about, if you like writing reviews, I think we can actually go a step further and be bringing this information and your writing and research and combining with the other big voices of the whiskey world and give people something they need, which is like a one-stop shop for whiskey that also enables people like, hey, if you really like the notes that Breaking Bourbon has, like we'll give you the link to the webpage. Like we're not trying to scrape traffic, just here's your jump off place and you figure out what information is valuable to you. And we make it easy to go off and follow, which kind of resonated with me being a science and data guy. Like let's bring it all in one place. And then if you want to go read, Breaking Bourbon or Whiskey Cast or Whiskey Advocate, like we'll just send you right off to their page and you can get more info.
Sure.
So that's kind of how it came about is being, we try and give people all the info you need for that 10 seconds you're standing in the store and you need to know whether to buy a Jefferson's Reserve, which plot twist, maybe don't unless it's on sale. But like stuff like that, like really quick, like, hey, I'm standing in the store. I have the bottle in my hand. I want to know good, bad, ugly, and about what price is good. And then if you go home and you're like, okay, but I want to read through some reviews while I'm drinking it, boom, that's all there. And they brought me in and said like, if we're going to build this, we need someone who's done some reviews and you've done 1 or 2. So let's build from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, how many reviews have you done? I mean, do you know how many reviews you've actually written and done?
Yeah. So I've posted like 1,955-ish. So we're really close to that 2,000 mark. I've written a bunch and duplicated on some and come back on others. So it's probably over 2K, but
yeah,
for science, we'll call it 1,950.
Wow. So now are all those reviews, are they all whiskey or are they all different things?
Sure. The vast majority are whiskey. Whiskey's always been my big focus, but I'm captivated by spirits like gin and agave spirits and in brandied rum as well. So I'd say probably about 1,600 of them, I think right now are purely just whiskey. And the rest are things like agave, which is a huge focus of mine recently, like the destillados and raicillas and tequilas and agaves and stuff like that. And cognac and fun stuff like that too, but overwhelmingly whiskey forward.
Yeah. So Whiskey Raiders though it's whiskey based. I mean, it is whiskey.
Whiskey.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I know that sounds kind of dumb to ask that question, but you just don't, you might slide a little gin in there somewhere or something. I didn't, just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. If you're on Whiskey Raiders, you'll see pure whiskey, but I do post other spirits to Instagram and Reddit, which I think is fun. And it's interesting too, how many times I drink a funky mezcal, and I sometimes get a note that I've been wondering about in a bourbon and stuff. So I think it's really educational to,
Gotcha.
not bourbon's like kind of similar. Like, there's a ton of complexity and variation, but spirits like rum and agave are just like so incredibly diverse that I think it's a good palate exercise, and it kind of keeps you from getting in a rut with just bourbon or rye and stuff. But
yeah, that makes sense. Now, you talked about it being kind of the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but yeah, I see what you're saying. And, with Rotten Tomatoes, obviously you've got the number that associates with that. And I know with your reviews, the things I've seen on Instagram from Whiskey Raiders, I'm always, that's the number, it always stands out. Like there was, I think, New Riff, you guys just posted New Riff today, maybe. Yeah. And, so I see the number there. So that number, how do you guys arrive? Is it a combination of other people's reviews, or how is that number calculated for Whiskey
Should we
Raiders?
Save this for the start of the third round, maybe?
Okay. All right.
So I don't want to interrupt it, but this would be like a
that's
really
true.
good.
This could be a long answer.
It could be meaty.
Yeah.
I'll keep it short, but I think that's a good idea.
All right. Well, yeah, we can do that because we're at like 22 minutes, and I don't want to. We talked before we started that we've gone as long as an hour and 45, and we said we would not, we wouldn't do that, Jay. And I don't want to, the first session we went like 27 minutes, so we'll call this session at a stop here, but we'll go back to the Booker's, the Pigskin Batch. The funny thing is about their stuff, it's named for certain things that relate somehow back to Booker or to the family. And Booker was apparently a very, very big football player back in high school, like a very good football player. I don't think he played I think he went to UK, but I don't think he played football there, but was a big football fan. And that's kind of was a family tradition, was for them to gather together. Everybody watches the college football. They're big college football fans. So that paid homage to his love and, him playing football in high school, but also being a huge football fan. But I really enjoy this. I hate the prices are going up. I just saw the 2021 batch 1 today at a local liquor store, and it was like $90 or $95. And I was like, yeah, I'm I love it, but gosh, man, that's just getting out of my league even though it's barrel proof and it's a limited release type of deal. But this batch by itself, I didn't pay that much for it. Absolutely. I really enjoy it. So what about you guys? What are your final thoughts on this one?
I enjoyed it. I think more of that peanut that you all were talking about is coming through on the palate. Get the cinnamon and the peanut, kind of those typical Knob Creek flavors that I usually come to love, really come through on the palate. And it's got a good, nice finish, good spice with it too.
Yeah, I like it. It reminds me of Jiffy peanut butter and like tiramisu and like pralines, which is fun. Like it's very desserty in a very nice way. And the proof is really manageable for 63%, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was, to me, the first drink or second drink I took, I was like, this to me does not drink as high as the Elijah Craig barrel proof that was 4 points or so lower. Mm-hmm. In my opinion, this drink had I don't want to say smooth, but it didn't drink to be as high a proof as the Elijah Craig, which is kind of surprising to me. So, all right, guys. So with that said, we'll take a break, get a word from our other sponsor, and we'll be right back with more with Jay Take West from Whiskey Raiders. Everybody just sit tight and we'll be right back.
Hey, Bourbon Lifers. We want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about 3 Chord Whiskey. 3 Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the 3 Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels. which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, each small batch blend of 3-Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12-bar reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from 3-Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the 3-Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about 3-Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final period or round or session or segment or whatever you want to call it of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me still, fortunately, my friend Matt is hanging out for the third round. Matt, how you doing over there?
Oh, Mark, I'm doing great. I wouldn't miss the third round for anything. I mean, come on, we've made it this far. You better stick around. Right. And we left a cliffhanger at the end of session round period number 2 with Jay West, the managing editor and critic from Whiskey Raiders. So, Mark, why don't you jump us? Well, let's talk about what we're drinking first before we get into the meat on this one.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So this round we've got Michter's Barrel Strength Kentucky Straight Rye Whiskey poured up. This one drops down in proof a little bit to 108.8. And I'll be honest, since we just kind of grabbed this one at the last minute, I really don't know. I don't know what the mash bill is on their rye. I don't know, Jay, if you know what it is or not off the top of your head, but I don't know. And I don't even know what the age is.
I don't know that they tell us. I know that we don't know the age. And
all right.
I would be surprised if Michter told us that mash bill, because that might clue us into where it came from, and we would hate to have that. So
there you go. All right. Well, all right. So there we go. So that's what we're going to be drinking this round, guys. And I love the color on this one. Just a nice.
Oh man, yeah.
Just beautiful, beautiful look, man. Just beautiful amber, golden, not golden, but just, I don't know. I just love the look of it. What do you guys get on the nose on this?
I right away.
I'm amazed.
Oh, go for it, Jay. Let her rip, man.
Jay, go ahead.
No. I was like, pause. I'll take it. I'm amazed at how much brown sugar there is here. Like, this is just delicious brown sugar clove spice bomb. I love it.
Yeah. See, to me, the brown sugar, it kind of, for some reason, for me, it almost has like a maple syrupy kind of flavor or nose to it. But I can see the brown sugar, maple syrup, to me, kind of similar. Matt, what about you?
I pick up a lot of caraway right on the nose. Like the rye bread is really coming through. I know it's closing out March here, so we just finished St. Patrick's Day, which Mark and I talked about. So there's definitely been a loaf of rye bread floating around my house for Rubens. So
where's that corned beef? That homemade corned beef that we talked about?
I've got some. Don't worry, I've got some. I set it aside. I was rushing out the door. I forgot it.
Russian. Speaking of Russian, did you put Russian
dressing out the
Rubens,
door.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, man. Yeah, last week or week before last week, I guess, right? Matt was he was talking about his homemade corned beef and all the wonderful stuff he does to make it and blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, how long have I known you? And I've never, ever, had seen this homemade corned beef, so I'm gonna hold him to it. But yes, caraway. See, Matt got all fancy. We started talking coriander and all these other spices, and then Matt drops the caraway bomb on the nose.
It kind of has like a caraway seed and like the rye and from the bread.
Sure,
like rye bread is really coming through, and there's a sweetness. You're both definitely. I'm picking up the sweetness you're talking about, Jay, with like a brown sugar. I'm getting some sort of like a bruleed, like a almost a burnt toasty sugar on it as well. And it does have a really, really nice sweet and a really enjoyable, just inviting nose to it.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So Jay, now we've covered that. Let's jump back into that meaty question about how in the world Whiskey Raiders comes up with these rating numbers that you had. I saw your post on Instagram about New Riff. Was it the backsetter? Was that what it was? Or was it the peated, I can't remember which one it was now. It was one of the newer releases that they did. But anyway, I saw that and you had the number up there. So that grabbed my attention. When I see that, that number always grabs my attention when I'm scrolling through Instagram. I see the bottle and then I see the number. So how do you guys arrive at your rating system? How do you get to that point?
Yeah, definitely. So that was the Backsetter Bourbon, which I actually thought was really good, and a lot of people agreed. So the big thing with this is we want to give everybody an equal voice, which sounds kind of strange. Like, I'm the in-house guy for Whiskey Raters, but my opinion is not weighted in any way. My opinion is weighted the same as, Mark from Whiskey Cast or, Jordan or Nick from Breaking Bourbon. And that was super important to me, is because it'd be really easy to be like, well, it's our website. So our in-house guy, like, he gets double the weight, like, but that didn't feel right. Like, and there's enough weirdness in how people rate whiskey to begin with. And and some people doubt scores anyways, especially people coming from the wine world, who like doubt the James Sucklings or the Robert Parkers of the world. So the first key is that every single aggregate source is approved by me, which I think is kind of fun because I get to, it's not like a gatekeep thing, but it also, like, we get to say, hey, these are the trusted and authentic voices, but it gives me the room that when someone else pops up, I just get to add them right in, and we get to start aggregating as well. So everybody uses a different scale. We've built this humongous rubric, whether you use the American grade school systems like A+, A minus, and this maps to a 0 to 100 score, or if you use a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 10 like I do. And that's like kind of fun too, because I don't write and I don't rate on the 100-point scale, which people always come to me with like kind of a head scratch, and like, this doesn't compute. Like your own website doesn't use your score. And it's because like I don't think that I'm good enough to tell you the difference between a 91 and a 92 and like write that in a way that is repeatable. But I don't cast shade at those who do. So we take into account people that use like 1.1, 7.7, 8.2, and then people who write on the 0 to 100 scales. Those all get normalized to a number, and then we take the average of those to what we call the rated scale, which is kind of funny because we joke like, it's completely like cool and people enjoy that we do this, but like we're literally like rating scores from people like a RAIDED. Like, we're out there rating, like, hey, okay, we grabbed your score, we grabbed your score, we grabbed your score. We're putting them in the pot. Here's the final score of the experts. And then that gives the consumer or the curious individual to know, like, hey, if something is going in the high 90s, it's because everybody is agreeing. 5+, 6+, 8+ critics are saying like, this stuff is fantastic. We get a lot of stuff in the kind of that middle range because some people love things a lot, some people love them less. I'm on the more critical side. And then, if you see something that's under 80, like it's a 70 or a 60 or 50, like swerve, stay away, because nobody is saying that this is even like good or passable. Like, if something is in those really low ranges, like just like, Danger Will Robinson, put that bottle down. And that's like kind of how we get there. And it's fun, and it's interesting. We tweak it a little bit now and then. Like, I'm big into math and kind of development and have the code and stuff to do that. So if we see that we need to make a little tweak, my goal is that we're no nirvana. Like, the scale will, the work that we do isn't perfect and it isn't finished, but we're going to get there someday and continue to make tweaks along the way so that we can help people find the whiskey that truly is best for them, whether it's their budget, whether it's their flavor profile, whether it's, and it's interesting too, because people can dig into, we show all the numbers that are normalized. So, Breaking Bourbon gave this an 82, Whiskey Cast gave this a 96. And if you know that you love stuff that Breaking Bourbon has, you might actually look past that aggregate score and be like, okay, this is lower because Breaking Bourbon rated it really low, and I love what they love and I hate what they hate. So like, I'm trying to give as much information to the consumer as possible.
So when you do that, are you saying, okay, guys, this is a bottle that we're going to review? Or are you saying I'm going out? Are you pulling reviews that they've already done and aggregating those with what you have done as well? Is that how you're working the process? I mean, because there's obviously thousands and thousands of reviews, man. So how are you managing that whole process?
Yeah, and you use the word process, and you're totally right, because it is a process. I'm thankful. One of the biggest kind of blessings of getting to do this is actually have people who work for me. I have 2 really great editors who also assist in, we're checking out. The first thing we tackled was my backlog, right? Like we have 1,600-ish reviews from me when we started, and we needed to go out and find reviews for every single one of those. And it took not a weekend. It took not a month. It took a long time. And it was a lot, like, it was just months of like aggregating and finding out who had the things I had, marking people who, and that's another important point too. If we have a minimum, if 3 aggregate sources haven't rated it, we mark it as TBD. So that way, we're getting like a good sample size, that is kind of trusted and stuff like that. But so we had to find at least 3 reviews for every single thing that I had done, which is, we were like, oh yeah, certainly that's not that bad. And, that's a lot of work. And we continue to do that going forward. There's some things that I haven't rated that I'm catching up on. And my eventual goal is kind of a spoiler here. Yeah, I'll kind of clue you guys in, but we also have I have a lot of bottles here that like other critics haven't tried yet. And I look forward to being like that WhistlePig 18, like not a lot of people are shelling out for that, but I would love to start sending some of that off to them and be like, hey, I'm not the producer. Like, give me your honest thoughts, because you get a review out of it. We get to boost up, get more aggregate scores to people. And then people don't have to doubt, like, WhistlePig sending you $400 whiskey, wanting you to say nice things. And so that's kind of how I see the future going, is like, we're crowdsourcing information. I have a ton of bottles here. Like, let's start sharing whiskey around so that everybody, like, hey, you couldn't get that in your market. Cool. We'll share a little bit, and kind of get those voices additional stuff so that they can review and we can build the most comprehensive database that exists.
That's a great plan, man. And that's going to be so helpful, for whiskey drinkers to find, well, I don't drink a lot outside of bourbon and rye, but, but, it's nice to have that resource, because, that's something that we do even for the podcast, is it's just to be able to jump on and find something that we can find reviews, we can find information, what other people have said about it. It's helpful for us as we, drink and review and talking to the master distillers. It's always good to have input from other people out there, so we know when we go into a show, what we're looking at, what we're going to be talking about. So that's really cool that you guys are doing that. And you're an IT guy, right? Is that your background? Is that, or
yeah, I write software by day, which is thankfully what made this an extreme. Like, there was a ton of work, but I kept all my reviews in a database, and I work in DevOps by day, so I'm all about automation and procedurally making things as continuous and as automated as they can be. And software has helped me a lot in all of these different pursuits.
So you're like Matt and me. We work, regular jobs, but you've got this other, man. I just can't imagine. Like, do you sleep like 2 hours a night, 3 hours a night, something like
kidding.
that?
That's what I'm thinking.
What the hell? I mean, seriously, how do you do all this?
Man, I live and die by the spreadsheet and the calendar. It sounds like super dumb, but I'm just that kind of person. I have always enjoyed, and that's why people laugh when they're like, surely you found, like, you went to the military. And I was like, actually, no, but I probably should have like a regimented schedule. Like, I schedule work blocks for myself, and I also schedule time off for myself. And, and I just know that these are the things that need to get done every day. And I do my day job and clock out and cook. Like, I love to cook. That's like my break between work and other work, is just like cooking dinner and like hanging out with my dog and my fiance for a while. But yeah, I mean, I don't get to sleep like 1 million hours a night, but I get a healthy amount. I always get my 6 or 7 hours, and it's kind of fun. But automation has made this hugely possible. And other than that, like spreadsheets and calendars, just gotta schedule blocks in.
I kind of envision you like Elf, Will Ferrell and Elf. I got a full 45 minutes of sleep, and then I did 16,000 reviews last night, and I built this rocking horse too.
Some days it feels like that, like especially when Raiders was priming to launch. It was right before the holidays, like repeal day event was going on. So I was like, doing my day job, like trying to transition all this stuff, get ready for the new website launch that like I still hadn't told a lot of people about. So it was like, people would be like, why are you busy? And I'm like, I can't tell you, but it's cool. Like, and then
right.
Also like getting ready for the holidays. And then once we launched, it was like kind of a relief, because like for once I just like sat in a chair and didn't do anything for a little while. It was just like for an hour, I was just like, I'm sitting, there's no computer on my lap, but I love what I do, which I'm thankful for. Like, none of this, even my day job, I love it. Like, none of it feels like work. It's sometimes it can get tiring, and sometimes the people aspect of things can be a little bit taxing, but it's really a pleasure to have these opportunities.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this. When you went with Whiskey Raiders, Abrams Media, you decided to do this. Have you, I'm just curious, have you faced any kind of backlash from anybody? Just because years ago I was a sports agent, but I work with skateboarders and bike riders, the guys that did like the X Games and stuff.
Yeah.
So, these guys, they are their own tribe, and they're very leery of people that kind of come in from the outside to try to help them make money or,
Sure.
to do anything. And any, you could see certain people that would come to these events, after I was in it for a couple of years, and I learned how to pick them out. These, people that would come in, and the guys were like, oh yeah, I don't know about that person, et cetera. And even guys that would start doing certain commercials, or they would, do certain sponsorships with other companies. They might get a little bit of ribbon from,
Yeah.
from other guys. So I'm just curious. I mean, in the anonymous Reddit world, I mean, have now that people know who you are, have you had people that have been like, oh man, what are you doing here? I mean, I'm just curious if that's happened.
Yeah. So, I'll be completely honest with you. I 100% expected it to happen. Like, because at this point too, I was like, I know Reddit pretty well, and like this could be rocky. Like, and I got it. Like, like I will have to convince people that this is a good thing, that this is, not affecting my authenticity or integrity. And I like had prepared for it for kind of a while, because I'm also like, I'm one of those people, like I want people to be happy, but I want people to know that like I'm doing this for the right reason. And if someone, accuses me of that, it's always kind of tough to be like here are the facts and like it. But surprisingly, I got very little blowback at all. And I think a lot of that came from the fact that for many, many years, I did not take product from any producers. And that was extremely atypical. I was paying for bottles. I was splitting bottles with my friends to procure stuff. And really it was COVID when I couldn't travel anymore. I couldn't go places. Wisconsin's a weird market because we don't have a great selection. And so at that point too, like I told people, like, 1% or less of my archive for everything will be provided by producers. And once we get close to, so 1% at 1,500 reviews is an extremely small number. And, and I told people for years, they'd be like, well, how much free product do you get? And I'd be like 0. And they'd be like, how? Like, you're at 1,200 reviews. I'm like, 0. Like, I did not want to invite the doubt of people. And like, I know people who have been like, I started this blog so I get free whiskey. And I'm like, that's cool. We clearly just have very different goals. And I think that was a huge asset in going, that people understood that, hey, when I partnered with Abrams to bring Whiskey Raiders, they understood that, it wasn't a sellout. It was, hey, like you're going farther. Like, this is an extremely valuable launch pad to keep doing what you're doing with a bigger audience to help more people. And if you were going to sell out, you probably would have done it years ago when the first person that came across your path. And looking back, I didn't expect quite as positive. Like, people have been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm super happy that people take time to like comb through the site and like, hey, there's a bug here. Like, hey man, have you considered adding this quick feature? But I have not gotten any negative reaction, which quite frankly, just in the Reddit world, is like almost kind of wary. Like, things are going too well. And I like, maybe the ninjas just haven't assassinated me yet, but like things are like, it's been extremely well received, both in the world of Dan Abrams and entertainment, and in the world of hardcore whiskey people, which I'm frankly kind of surprised by, but I'm super happy with, because it means that the 9 months of development we did on this website landed exactly what I wanted to, which was giving people who are new to whiskey and hardcore whiskey veterans a great place to go for information. And I think it's doing that pretty well.
Yeah. And that's a good thing. I mean, because people know you're legit. I mean, people know that's what you do. And like you said, they know your background, and they know that you're not out there doing this just to get free stuff like Matt and I are. So,
the sole purpose.
Well, and it's always interesting when I meet like a whiskey reviewer, and they'd be like, review 2, someday I'll get free whiskey. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's the approach I'd go with, but
yeah.
And there's plenty of that for everybody, but it was clear that my goal was to just talk about whiskey. And now, like, there's stuff that I just won't be able to buy in Wisconsin, and I'm happy to, accept a sample of that. And I clearly tell people like, hey, they provided this. And if you want to ignore that review and go read the 1,600 other unsponsored reviews, totally go for it.
Well, and that's just part of it. We didn't start the podcast. I mean, Matt and I are we're bourbon fans, rye fans. Matt's a bigger rye fan than bourbon probably. So, But you know, I mean, I'm a lifelong Kentuckian, man. So bourbon to me it's the lifeblood of my state, our economy, and I'm a huge fan of it. So I'm going to do everything I can to promote bourbon, since 95% of the world's bourbon is made here. You know, I'm going to do everything I can to promote that industry and promote my state to as many people as I can. And you know, it's just kind of funny that I guess as we have master distillers and other people on the show, you know, they will send us stuff to drink with them. But to me, that's part of the fun, is to get the opportunity to introduce a lot of listeners to different people like you. I mean, people that don't know who you are, people that aren't on Reddit, or people that maybe know who Take is, but they don't know who Jay is, you know? So
Yeah.
they could think you're Batman. I don't know, you know, who knows, right? But it's just fun for us to be able to share those stories. And yeah, so we do get some free bottles, but of course we always tell people that, you know, that they've sent it to us. So that's why I have Matt here. Matt's always upfront and honest on his tasting notes. So
It's not like nobody pays attention to our tasting notes anyway. So
I was going to say,
nobody really cares.
Nobody really cares that much about what we have to say. They just, you know,
No,
they
it
like to
tastes like
listen to our
bourbon.
guests.
No, I think that's good. And like, I mean, that's the thing too. Like, there's just like so much murkiness. Like when people are just like upfront and like, hey, like someone sent me this bottle, like take that as you will. Like that's really all that matters. Like, you know, like,
Yeah,
I don't know. We all know that everybody, like, there's free product floating around everywhere, and it's when people are like, I totally bought this myself, and I'm like, you know, but
yeah,
just be upfront, be honest. That's all the people need.
Mhm.
Let the readers make their choices and stuff like that.
yeah. I agree with that. Well, we're actually at the end, but before we go, though, I want to know what's coming up. What's next? What's going on with Take and Whiskey Raiders, man? What do you guys got planned?
Oh man,
Come on.
We've got some great bottles. Like I got some reviews I'm super pumped to push out. We've been doing a lot of tastings, a lot of virtual stuff. I'll be in Kentucky next week getting some content for Whiskey Raiders and for the Our Bourbon program. So, you know, it's not same old, but more of what we've been enjoying doing, trying to get more content to people. I think that's really about it. Like we don't like Whiskey Raiders was like the big launch. So
Right. Yeah. It's not like you're not like Whiskey Raiders is not going to have like a new release of bourbon next week or something like that. Right. So
yeah, I mean, we're adding probably 4 to 8 bottles a day. So every time you come to the site, there's fresh stuff.
Holy Moses.
Yeah, it's we stay busy. And not all of it is 100% reviewed by me at this point, but I'm catching up to our gaps in releasing my own reviews. But yeah, there's always fresh stuff, and that's what we've been working really hard on between press releases. And it's not quite bourbon, but I'm pumped. The new Glendronach single cask for Scotch came, so those reviews will be up next week, which are one of my favorite Scotch producers. But we're straying into the weeds at this point.
Wait, Scotch. Wait, this is the Bourbon Life, man. Come on.
I know. I was like, that's what I'm jazzed about. But you know, because we just posted the Elijah Craig and Larceny barrel proof reviews, which were super fun to do. That was kind of like my like firecracker this week. So you know, got to show all whiskey some love, even if bourbon is the best.
There you go. That's right. All right, guys. So let's wrap it up. What final thoughts on this barrel strength rye from Michter's? All right. Who wants to go first?
Who wants it?
Matt?
I'll take it. Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
I like it. I like it a lot, actually. The nose is coming through. I had that caraway come through earlier, and the longer it's sitting, it's turning more. I'm getting honey and like a honey grain, almost like a honey oat, but kind of the raw grain is coming through on it. But then on the palate, it's got a really nice zesty flavor, like almost lime or grapefruit, and a really creaminess that it finishes with. And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. The barrel strength rye is consistently, I think, one of my favorite Michter's products, and this is really no different. Those really big, like that maple note is totally right on. That big brown sugar kind of toffee and that kind of undercurrent of pepper and rye spice just works so well here.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. As I was tasting it, you know, I almost picked up like a little bit of a mintiness to it, which is kind of weird because I never pick up mint on Michter's, but for some reason tonight, you know, it's like one of those weird things. And you know, the bad thing about me is, Jay, I sit here and I drink with people, and we do the show, week after week, and I don't sit here and take notes as I drink things, and I could probably kick myself in the head for that. You know,
it's all recorded.
You need a
that's true.
scribe. Yeah.
I do. See, I need an assistant too. Matt and I need an assistant that will.
I thought I was the assistant. Maybe I've just been shirking my duties for the last 58 episodes here. I just now got the note.
Oh man. Oops, Matt, you're supposed to be taking notes. What I'm tasting here. Mark said it was sweet. Mark said it was spicy. All right, guys. So I guess we'll wrap it up here. Jay, before we close it out, though, anything else you want to add or say to our listeners, or where can they find you and Whiskey Raiders?
Yeah, totally. Well, first off, thanks so much for having me. It's really fun to get out of my tasting room and talk to people and have a good time, especially in COVID. But if you're looking for us, you can find me at whiskeyraiders.com. That is Raiders, like Raiders of the Lost Ark, one of the better movies of all time. So RAIDERS, whiskeyraiders.com. And from there, that's where I'm doing all my stuff. We're on Instagram as well at Whiskey Raiders. We're on Facebook, but hop on over, check us out. I have my own Instagram at take.review, but Whiskey Raiders is where you want to be. And if you message that, I'll reply. That's kind of the fun part. People, if you have questions or want to see something reviewed, just drop me a line, and I'm usually pretty speedy. So I love talking to people. And
because he doesn't have anything else to do with his time.
I know, man.
Yeah, he's got 18 free hours in the day to sit there and reply to you. So.
I know, and that's funny. Like I try and respond to emails and Instagram stuff as fast as I can. But yeah, every now and then, like I'm doing, I don't know, something else. But
you're doing work, writing software, writing code, doing development, whatever.
It's a hard knock life.
Yeah, man. Somebody's got to live it, though, right? All right, Matt, before we close it out, anything else you want to add?
Oh, Jay, thanks so much for sitting down and talking with us, man. It was super cool, super interesting to hear about what you're doing and your past and how you've taken just a hobby and really turned it into something that you really enjoy and that is providing a really great good and service to everybody out in the whiskey world. And it's not just, I think it's really cool that it's not just about your reviews, that you are actively seeking out to bring in other reviews as well and value those as much as your own. So that's really cool. I think this is a really valuable resource, and I'm glad to see that the bourbon whiskey community has one. Thanks for doing that, man.
Oh yeah. Thanks for saying so.
Yeah. Very cool, Jay. It's always good to see you, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully we'll be able to do some things again in the future. When you get down to Kentucky, let us know. Love to get together sometime if you're able, if you have some free time.
Yeah, I'll be down a couple times this year, so we'll meet up and get a drink and check out the tavern.
All right, we'll compare beard notes, and Matt can just sit and be jealous.
He could be the judge. No, he could be the judge. He could be the judge in all this.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm going to thank our sponsors first. The Stave Restaurant, again, check them out online, thestavkentucky.com. Out there on McCracken Pike between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, making some great food out there. So you definitely want to give them a visit. And when you're out on the Bourbon Trail, it's a great place to go. And then also 3-Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their sponsorship as well. Ari Sussman, the master distiller, master blender there, and Neil Giraldo, the owner, just great guys. Had them on the show last year. So check them out at 3chordbourbon.com. And with that said, I'm going to send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.